So we've had a bit of a controversy in the last week, Guy, with regard to the early release scheme in respect of prisoners. I don't know whether you've seen any of that. We've had this issue that Britain's capacity in terms of locking people up has reached its maximum, and they've got to clear spaces effectively. So they've got to turf people out early, whereas previously they'd been turfing them out after they'd served 2/3 of their sentence. Now it's down to half of their sentence after the Sentencing Act of 2026. And that's caused somewhat of a controversy because whilst we've had a sort of row back from Andy Burnham with regard to some of those people that would have been able to take advantage of this system, there are still others that are going to be released. I think particularly the killers of this guy, PC Andrew Harper, which was a dreadful case. I don't know whether you remember the details.
And the guy who was towed behind a car, wasn't he? And there was one guy isn't being released, is he? But his two accomplices, if you like, who I think were found guilty of manslaughter as opposed to murder. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then his the PC's wife she's quite right, understandably very vocal, very articulate. And she made it directly.
They were sentenced, I believe, for 13 years, and they're getting out after 6.5, effectively. So you can quite understand why she's upset
100%.
by it all.
100%.
It's crazy. It does seem. Anyway, it got me on to thinking in terms of the broader spectrum, because my thoughts have always been on this issue that I think we lock people up for things that when they're not really a danger to society, they're not violent, they're not criminal, and therefore we fill half of our prison spaces with these, I wouldn't say necessarily low-level offenders, but offenders that could serve their time in the community. So if you've committed fraud, for example, we locked up, didn't we? You probably remember Jeffrey Archer was locked up, and we locked up Jonathan Aitken. These people aren't a danger to society. Far better, surely, to say to criminals such as those that, right, we're going to hit you with a huge fine, like Archer, we're going to take away half your houses and what have you, and then you're going to do community service for the next 3 years. As it was, he went inside, he was in a low-level prison, wrote some bestsellers while he was in there, and cost the state somewhere £30,000 to £60,000 a year to keep him locked up. That doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I think we could deal with things completely different. So in terms of the immediate crisis, I thought I'd have a look at how we compare to one of the more successful states in Europe in terms of dealing with these things, the Netherlands. Now, have you ever had a look at how the Netherlands deal with prisons and what have you?
Nope.
No.
Well, instinctively, one would say they're probably going to be a little bit more relaxed and liberal. If you just take Amsterdam as an example, and their views on cannabis shops, on the red light district, for example. No, but beyond that, I don't know anything about that.
You don't know.
Custodial.
Just to give you an indication, there was a sea change in the way the Dutch dealt with things back in the early 2000s, because up to that point, they had a much higher rate of incarceration over there than they do now. But the rate now is, well, in this country, we put away 162 people on average per 100,000 of the population. They put away 70.
Okay.
It's virtually half. Half the population. And they have far fewer prisons, as you can imagine. And they look at things. They look at things in a completely different fashion. They consider low-level offenders should serve their sentence in the community, and there are other offences where people don't even get a mark on their, a blot on their copybook for the offences they committed. They just go back into the community and do community service in that regard. So the interesting thing about that is they still lock away high-level and violent offenders. So you wouldn't have the rapists and the murderers and people involved in manslaughter out on the streets, albeit they have a lower sentencing level. They don't get locked away for anywhere near as long. but their recidivism rates, so the reoffending, again, are much lower than in this country, much, much lower, which is quite, I would say, quite interesting. And I think the way that we're looking at things over here, I mean, at the moment, over the last 14 years, you probably heard the figure that the last government built 500 extra new spaces. And that's net, to be fair to them, because they've had to shut down a load of old Victorian prisons. The 500 new spaces is nowhere near sufficient to be able to cover the rate of increase of the numbers of people who are committing crime in this country. It's an actual horrendous increase. And the way we're going at the moment in terms of increasing our prison population, we're going to need to build 36 new mega prisons within the next 25 years. It's a huge number, which I just find absolutely astonishing. And yet we don't seem to be in any way suggesting at the moment that we need to take a new look at our outlook in terms of prisons and locking people up. I mean, what's your initial reaction to that?
Well, when you hear those stats, you say, let's at the very least have a look at their approach. First of all, there's no way on earth we're going to build 36 prisons, so you can forget that. So you're going to have to look at a different approach. And if you think about what you call low-level crimes, I think at a sort of headline level, you go, yeah, that makes sense, particularly if the reoffending rates are very low. But then you say, well, what are they? So I'll give you, for example, let's just say there was a fraudster, which you might say, like a Jeffrey Archer, shouldn't be a custodial sentence. But let's just say his or her skill was persuading people to give up their life savings in a scam that isn't refundable because the person's given away their passwords or transferred the money themselves, really being stupid, and that they pick on the elderly and the vulnerable. Would they qualify for community service, not going to prison? Or would you say that they should have a custodial sentence, as an example?
Yeah, I think I'm of the view, if they're not a physical danger to society, that they ought to serve their sentence in the community. And I'm also of the view that they ought to be making recompense to those people so if they're working, they ought to have some of their income taken away, and they also ought to be on tag, and they also ought to be doing community service at the same time. I don't see why the state ought to be looking to, not only that, but I mean, they make the valid point when I've been doing this research that if you take a breadwinner out of society, if you put them away, lock them up, if they've got a family, then you're making that family reliant upon the state, aren't you, 90% of the time?
Yeah,
they've got to find the extra money. So, the point is, it depends what you're looking to do, doesn't it? If you're just looking to lock them up and throw away the key, there are a lot more consequences to it. There's no danger to it.
Let me just extend my example. Let's just say you were one of the victims and I don't know, you've been defrauded, let's make it up, of £20,000. And there was no way you can get it back because you'd made the transfer, you'd shared your codes, PIN numbers, all the rest of it. Would you feel the same then if the person was tending the roses in the gardens down the road?
If I was taking £300 a month from them in terms of them making recompense for the money that they'd taken from me.
But let's just say that's pie in the sky because they wouldn't.
Well, you can't just say that's pie in the sky.
No, but you can, because the idea that because this person wouldn't have done it once, they would have done it to loads of people. The idea that they could pay everyone back is probably for the birds. So but I'm saying if they were unable to pay you back, would you be happy with that person just doing a community service, punishment in the community type thing?
But you're not looking at rehabilitation then, you're just looking at punishment.
I'm asking you as a member of the public.
And I'm asking you, and I'm saying you're just...
You haven't answered yet.
Yeah, I would be happy with it. I would be happy with it.
You'd be happy with it.
I would be happy with it.
Okay.
Right, not happy. Well, nobody's going to be happy, are they, if they've had that money taken away from them? But what you're asking me is, would I prefer to carry on paying through my tax system a huge amount of money each year that could be used on hospitals and other public services to keep them in a prison cell? Seems to me just nonsense. I'd rather they were paying something back to society, even if they had increased taxation rates, because they'd have to pay something. They'd have money taken away. And I'd like to see them on the outside suffer because they haven't got the lifestyle that they were leading before.
Okay. And what was
Somebody
the question you
said in
asked
one
me?
of-
What did you ask me?
Somebody said in one of these articles that it would make prisoners think twice if they thought somebody would come along and take their house from them. And it would,
Yeah.
wouldn't it, really? It would make...
If you've got one, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you were talking about those who are... some that are wealthy enough, if they came along, whatever your wealth, if they came along and took half of it, it would make them think twice about committing a crime in the first
I
place.
think they can do that anyway with the Proceeds of Crime Act. But I
No,
just
they can't, because you're talking about they can only look at the proceeds of crime. They can't look at taking away something that had accumulated beforehand. So they can't do that. But yeah, go on, carry on. What were we going to say?
I was just thinking, I was going to ask you. You wanted to ask me something, but before you did answer the question.
Yeah, I can't remember. What did I ask you now?
You used the words rehabilitation.
Yeah, you're more... Yes, that's right. You're more in favour of punishment than rehabilitation.
No, I just think you've got to balance it, because the person who's been wronged has to feel that they've had justice, because that's the justice system.
Punishment, isn't it? That's punishment. Yeah,
punishment. But they have to feel they have to sit there and say, that's reasonable for what they did to me or my family. Rehabilitation, yes, of course, that's a good thing. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you rehabilitate somebody who, in this case, who is good at fraud, for want of a better expression, and realizes that they can make a lot of money from it. I don't know how you do it.
We have to make the cost sufficient for them not to want to do it again.
Okay.
And the way you do that in this particular... I mean, we can go on as we are at the moment, but we would have to build 36 new mega prisons.
That's not going to happen.
And the cost is going up and up and up. And indeed, the Dutch have slashed the cost. And on the basis of working on their system, and this is AI produced, obviously it's not something that is... it's not something that can't be argued. I reckon that... over the course of the next 10 years, were we to adopt the Dutch model, it would save the country £18 billion per annum, which is no mean feat, is it? That would solve our defence investment for starters, wouldn't it? And a bit more.
It probably would. The question is, would the Prime Minister have the political will to tackle it?
Well, yes. It's going to need a sea change, certainly.
Yeah.
But I think it's a way we have to look. We have to look at alternatives, and we have to look at... nobody's suggesting that we shouldn't lock away those criminals that are violent and a danger to society. But I think we have to look at the other end of the spectrum much more closely as to what we do with them and how we...
No, I do agree.
Deal with them.
And if it meant that we create capacity to not have to release the killers of the policemen after only half their term, I would agree with that, because I do think that is an insult to the family.